This took place more than 20 years ago. I was driving home with my girlfriend after spending the evening at my aunt's house in Estacada. It was Christmas Eve, and my mom's family always had a big party there. Now my girlfriend had never met my family before, so I was a bit nervous about how she would feel being around so many new people. But she fit right in, chatting easily with my aunts, uncles, and cousins. They all seemed to like her, and she also seemed to enjoy herself. We spent most of the afternoon and evening talking, playing poker, opening presents, and drinking. By the time we had to leave, my girlfriend was pretty tired, so I was the one driving us home. It was around 11 p.m., and I was driving her car. Now, this part of the road is surrounded by farms and thick patches of forest, and some sections don't have streetlights. But I wasn't worried, as I grew up around here and knew the road really well. We were just driving and talking, two young people enjoying our time together. There's a part of the highway that goes down a steep, long hill before crossing over Deep Creek. On both sides of the road, there are thick, dark forests, and there are no lights anywhere. The only thing we could see was the stretch of road lit up by our headlights. I drove down the hill, crossed the bridge, and then went uphill through more forest. As the highway starts to level out, something suddenly darts across the road so quickly that I almost hit it. I slammed on the brakes, then I turned to my girlfriend and asked if she saw it too. She said she did, but she couldn't tell what it was. But then we both wondered if it was a coyote, since they're pretty common in this area. Even though something felt strange about it, coyotes don't usually run out in front of cars like that. So, for some reason, I decided to check it out. I turned the car around and turned on the high beams to light up the forest where it had gone. I stepped out of the car and walked towards the woods, but I don't see anything. I start to think maybe I made a big mistake. I look around. I don't spot anything unusual in the trees. Then, suddenly, the car's horn blares loudly and continuously. It's not a short, polite honk that you might use to get someone's attention. So I walk back to the car and ask my girlfriend why she had honked like that. She didn't say anything, but pointed to a spot about 50 feet away from where I had been standing. I looked in that direction, and that's when I saw it. Now, it looked like it was the same thing that had run in front of our car. It was a man covered in dirt and mud from head to toe. He was holding a hatchet in one hand, and his wild appearance made me feel uneasy. He glanced back at us, then gave a strange smile and waved before turning around and walking back into the dark forest. We were both so shocked and scared that we immediately drove away as fast as we could. Once we were safely back on the road, my girlfriend told me she had seen the same thing and was just as frightened as me. While I was trying to find the man in the area where he had disappeared, he had actually circled around and came out from another spot in the forest, outside the reach of our headlights. My girlfriend caught a glimpse of him out of the corner of her eye and saw that he was walking toward me with his hatchet raised. That's when she honked the horn to warn me. When we got home safely, we called the police. They never found anyone. Or maybe they did and just didn't tell us. The officer we talked to said he thought the man was trying to ambush people who were alone, but we all agreed that my girlfriend's quick thinking probably saved my life because it made the man realize I wasn't alone out there. This took place earlier last year, and it still gives me creeps if I think about it. I'm a female, and I work as a delivery driver for Uber Eats. I've been doing it for about a year to make some extra money. Now it's a pretty easy job, but the pay isn't great, especially at night. Normally, any orders I get after 10 p.m. are just crappy fast food deliveries to customers, and tipping is already rare, like maybe 2 out of 10 people tip on Uber Eats. So, yeah, late-night deliveries aren't really worth it. That's why I hardly ever do them. However, this year, there was a bonus offer. Complete 15 deliveries in a certain time frame and get an extra $75. That sounded great to me. When that kind of bonus is available, late-night deliveries are awesome because there's no traffic, and it doesn't matter where you're picking up from, it's all about earning the bonus. The faster you finish the deliveries, the sooner you can go home with the cash. With empty roads, it was perfect for me. Now, I was on a roll and finished my last McDonald's delivery at 2:30 in the morning. I earned my bonus and called it a night. For context, this happened in downtown San Diego. The center of downtown has fun restaurants and clubs, but as you move out from the core, it gets sketchier. There are lots of homeless camps and other rough spots. I usually try to avoid that area, but to get home and back on the freeway, I had to drive through it. Now, I drive a 2002 Ford Focus, which is pretty old, and nothing in it is automatic. To roll the windows up or down, I have to reach over and crank a lever. Since it's a hassle to do that every time, I usually just keep both windows rolled down during deliveries, as it's easier to pick up and drop off food that way. Unfortunately, on this night, like usual, I had my windows down. I planned to roll up the windows before I passed 16th Street, where the homeless camp was, but I didn't get the chance. As I turned down a side street heading towards the main road, I saw a man up ahead wearing one of those orange reflective construction vests standing on the side of the road. There's always some kind of construction happening downtown, especially at night, so I didn't think much of it. As I got closer, the man suddenly ran into the middle of the street, waving his arms and signaling for me to stop. At first, I thought he might be directing traffic or trying to reroute me because of some construction, so I started to slow down. I brought my speed down, leaving some distance between us while I tried to figure out what was going on. But then, he started jogging toward my car, and before I knew it, he was standing directly in front of it, blocking me from moving forward. He was close enough that I couldn't just drive around him, so I was stuck there. I felt a rush of unease. This was really strange, and I really wish my windows were rolled up. Now it was 3 a.m. on a dark street, and the only people around were me and this guy. I've heard about fight-or-flight responses and always wondered how I'd react if I was ever in a situation like this. Now I know that my reaction was to just freeze. As I was slowing down, it took me a few seconds to realize something was off. This guy was not a construction worker, despite the hard hat and vest he was wearing. What really got to me was the creepy smile he had on his face. At first, I thought he was just trying to be friendly, but his smile didn't go away. Count to 5 in your head while grinning, and you'll see what I mean. That's what this guy was doing. Now that he's right in front of me, I can tell he's probably homeless. He's an older guy, maybe in his 60s, but homelessness can make people look older than they really are. His eyes were wild, and he was grinning with all his teeth showing. His smile and behavior reminded me of Twisty from American Horror Story. You can Google him if you want. I should have reversed my car, but my brain was in panic mode, and I didn't think quickly enough. The whole time he's not saying a word, just staring at me. Then, out of nowhere, he jumps onto the hood of my car and starts slamming his fists down. I'm paralyzed with fear, just watching him. He keeps pounding on the hood and crawling around on his hands and knees. He didn't say anything. He just crawled around on the hood and kept staring at me with that creepy grin. The worst part was that he never broke eye contact, not even for a second. It was like he was trying to intimidate me. The thought that my windows were open made me want to throw up from fear. I was terrified that if I made any sudden moves or looked away, he might try to get into the car. The whole time he remained completely silent. I think it would have been less scary if he had said something, but he didn't. He just kept pounding on the car and staring at me. The whole thing probably lasted only about 15 seconds, but it felt like forever. I was freaking out, and before I could think clearly or do anything smart, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror coming up behind me from down the street. This man saw the headlights too, and in an instant, he jumped off my car and ran toward the new car coming up behind me. I hit the gas and didn't look back until I was halfway home on the freeway. By then, I was just full of adrenaline. After that night, I stopped doing deliveries at night for a long time. I definitely don't go to that part of downtown anymore. I now take a longer route home. I also keep my windows up at night if I'm in any area that seems even a little sketchy. What I learned from this is how naive I was to trust and obey someone just because they were wearing a uniform. I didn't even question slowing down at first, even though the situation was really suspicious. Actually, it was the opposite. I felt like thinking that someone trustworthy was out there. I thought, oh great, a public servant doesn't want me making a wrong turn. By the time I stopped, it would have already been too late if this guy had wanted to attack me. I shudder just thinking about it. I eventually calmed down by telling myself that this was probably just a crazy guy who didn't mean any harm. I'm going to believe that's true for my own peace of mind. But what really bothered me was that this guy was dressed like a road worker, complete with a hard hat and vest. He even stood in the middle of the road and signaled me to stop, which made the whole situation seem more believable. We're about to start building our house, so I've been meeting a lot of new contractors and trying to get everything organized, but one of the biggest challenges has been finding someone to do the foundation work. Over the last few months, I've called tons of different contractors, and most of them told me they couldn't take on the job, but they'd always say, "I know someone who can," and give me the name and number of another person to call. I kept calling and getting the same answer over and over, like a never-ending cycle. Then, one day, I finally got the number for a guy named Joe. Joe seemed really excited about the job. He was the most responsive and nicest contractor I've talked to so far. We set up a time to meet, and he came out to my place to check out the site. He seemed really sure that he could handle the job. He asked if he could take the plans home to review them and promised to get back to me soon with a quote. I agreed and handed him the plans, but I made it clear that I would need them back soon. After that, we ended up meeting with another contractor. Now, the second contractor was really impressive, and after thinking it over, we decided to hire him for the job instead. But on Friday, I realized Joe still had the plans, and we needed them back soon because the first steps of the project were about to start. So I sent him a text asking if he could meet me at the grocery store at noon to give them back, and he agreed. Around noon yesterday, I got to the grocery store parking lot. I texted Joe right away to let him know I was there, and he showed up soon after. He parked next to my car and got out. I got out too, and noticed he didn't have the plans with him. Confused, I asked him where the plans were and if he'd brought them. He said, "Oh no, they're back at my house." "Do you need them?" I was a bit annoyed at this point, so I just said, "Yes, the guy prepping the site needs them." "Well then," he said, "you can follow me to my house, and I'll give them to you." I started to feel uneasy because only my husband knew I was meeting this guy, and I didn't know him very well. So I asked how far his house was. Joe said, "Neighboring town, and it will take only 5 minutes to go there." I'm starting to feel more uneasy the more I think about it. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but I'm ready to leave quickly if I need to. I told Joe, "Let me call my husband. I might not have time because we need to be somewhere else," giving myself an easy way out. I walked away to a spot where Joe couldn't hear me so I could think clearly and call my husband. Luckily, he answered, and I explained everything that had happened so far. He agreed it sounded a bit suspicious and told me to be honest with Joe and say I wasn't comfortable going to his house. I hung up and went back to where Joe was waiting. I told him, "I do have time, but I'm not going to your house because I don't know you well enough. Instead, I'll wait in the parking lot across from the fish factory." Joe seemed confused and didn't know where I meant. After some back and forth, trying to explain where I would be waiting, I suggested I drive first, and he could follow me. That way, he could see where I was going, and then go to his house, grab the plans, and meet me back at the parking lot. I was also proud of myself because I can be a bit shy and too polite, which sometimes isn't good for me. This time, I was direct and clear with everything I said. I felt like I was really focused on how I was speaking. I got in my car, drove first, and Joe followed me. I pulled into the community development parking lot. Then I checked to make sure Joe saw me, and I noticed he had stopped in the middle of the empty street and was signaling for me to turn my car around. Since I was a good distance away, I got out of my car to hear him better. He was yelling for me to turn around and follow him because his house is right there. I told him again that I wasn't going to his house and that I would wait right there for him to come back. He looked annoyed for a moment, but then nodded and drove away down the street, leaving me to wait. Less than a minute later, he came back with the plans and handed them to me. I quickly took them, said a quick goodbye, and left. Once I was out of there, I had a chance to think and reflect. Now, it only took him less than a minute to get the plans from his house, so it means one of two things. If he lived so close, why didn't he know what the community development building and the fish factory were? He should be able to see them from his house if he's that close. Or maybe he had the plans with him the whole time. Also, my husband and I tried to look him up afterward, but we couldn't find anything about Joe online. He doesn't have an email, business name, or registered phone number. Now I realize that aside from my husband, no one else knows I've been talking to or meeting with him. He doesn't appear as a contractor online, and since we decided not to use him, I never looked him up until now. This took place about a month ago, and we still talk about it as we can't figure out what happened or what was about to happen to us. It was around 7 p.m. in November, so it was already dark in Metro Detroit. I was driving, and my fiancé was in the passenger seat. Now, we were getting off a highway and turning onto a mile road near the city's shopping mall and outlet centers. Since we were so close to the mall, it was strange that the road was so empty at that time of night. As we were driving on the deserted westbound side of the road, we noticed a car stopped in the middle lane, still running. It was dark except for the street lights, spaced about every 80 yards, but we could clearly see the car's brake lights were on. The speed limit on this road is 45 to 50 miles per hour, and it's not a good idea to stop so close to where people are getting off the highway. So we slowed down because we're careful drivers. We drove up to the car and passed it in the far left lane since it was in the middle lane. When we were about a car length ahead, the driver suddenly hit the gas and started speeding to catch up to us. We noticed there was still no traffic in either direction. The driver behind us started swerving between the middle lane and the left lane, almost like they were trying to sideswipe us on purpose. Now, this was an instant red flag. It didn't seem like the driver was drunk or distracted. They were in control of their swerving and got dangerously close to hitting the side of my Jeep while going 45 miles per hour. So it gave us a really bad feeling. Before we knew it, a bright spotlight from the other car's driver's window shone directly into our car through the passenger window. I have tinted windows on my Jeep, which usually help block out the sun, but even with the tints, the spotlight was so bright that it completely blinded us. We couldn't see anything except white light. I didn't have time to check my mirrors before slamming on the brakes, and I'm not sure I could have seen anything in them anyway after being blinded. When we opened our eyes, the other car was already yards ahead, speeding away. I don't put up with nonsense, so I started speeding down the road to catch up and get the car's license plate number. In Michigan, we have Michigan left turn lanes, and I saw the car ahead turning into one to enter the mall parking lot, which has a big roundabout. The roundabout speed limit is about 25 miles per hour with lots of stop signs and intersections. While my fiancé was on the phone with 911, I was trying hard to catch up to the car. They were running through every red light and stop sign they came across. Dispatch told us not to follow them, but I kept going anyway because I was really upset and determined to get their license plate number. I made sure to keep a safe distance and drive at a safe speed. There was no way I was going to get too close since we didn't know if they had a weapon or something dangerous. To make a long story short, the driver realized we were following them and started speeding through the roundabout, cutting off other drivers and running through intersections. We lost sight of them eventually, and also we didn't want to risk our safety or the safety of other drivers just because I was angry, so we stopped chasing them. Instead, we went to another shopping center across the street where we saw the driver go. We thought we might spot them again if we looked around, but we never found that car again. and I'm not sure what would have happened if he had managed to crash into us on that empty mile road, or if his spotlight had made me lose control of the car. We don't think this was road rage because we hadn't done anything to provoke him. We were just driving along, minding our own business,